welcome to the DSR Daily. I'm David Rothkopf, joined by Riley Fessler. How are you, Riley?
Pretty good.
Pretty good. And Minna Stein. How are you, Minna?
I'm well, thanks. How are you?
Excellent. And it's Thursday as we record this here in the United States. And who's going to start us off?
I am. In a primetime address, French President Emmanuel Macron emphasized that Europe must be prepared to defend Ukraine independently if the U.S., under the Trump administration, reduces support. Macron stressed the need for Europe to invest in defense capabilities to deter Russian aggression, warning that abandoning Ukraine would embolden Russia and threaten European security. While working towards peace, Macron, alongside British Prime Minister Keir Starmer, also acknowledged the potential for European forces to be involved in Ukraine's defense to ensure a lasting peace agreement with Russia.
Yeah, well, of course, that's what's going to happen. You know why? Because the Europeans are, do you think they're maybe soft-hearted and just inspired by the Ukrainian story? No, that's not it. They realize that if Russia takes more of Ukraine, if Russia does not pay a price for going into Ukraine, if yet Russia is allowed to achieve its goals, it will continue on in Moldova, in Georgia, in the Baltics, against Poland, against other places. Russia's conducting an offensive. Some of the offensive is military. Some of the offensive has already gained ground in parts of Georgia, in parts of Ukraine. But some of the offensive is also political, trying to shift parties in Europe over to the Russian side, whether that's successful in Hungary or Serbia, or whether it's getting inroads as it has done in Germany and France and the UK. This is existential. The Europeans realize it's existential. Most Americans realize it's existential. And so if Trump adopts a policy where he pulls out, it's not going to have the effect that he thought it would. It's not going to be like, oh, game over, the U.S. is out, because the Europeans don't have a choice. They must fight. They must push back. And I certainly hope they will do so with the energy and support that this is going to require. That remains to be seen, because this is a new role for them to play. But it's heartening to see Macron make these kind of statements, as it has been heartening to hear some of the statements from Keir Starmer or the new leadership coming in Germany. Riley?
The Department of Veterans Affairs plans to reduce its workforce by over 80,000 employees, as outlined in a memo reported by the New York Times, part of President Trump's broader effort to shrink the federal bureaucracy. While some cuts may involve early retirement or severance packages, previous attempts to reduce staff voluntarily fell short, leading to tens of thousands of firings across federal agencies. VA Secretary Doug Collins assured that health care services and benefits would not be affected, with 300,000 positions deemed mission critical, but critics, including Democrats and unions, argue the cuts will harm veterans by increasing wait times and reducing services.
Yeah, I mean, seriously? You don't think firing 80,000 people is going to have an effect on the services that are being delivered or the speed with which they can be delivered? Of course it is going to have an effect. It is a massive hit. But let's start with the first part. It's firing 80,000 people who've decided to devote their lives to public service, who are seeking to help veterans who have devoted their lives to the United States, and now they're going to be let go for reasons of efficiency. Nonsense, because these people have been in office for 6 weeks. They have not conducted one single study as to what is waste, what is fraud, what is abuse. They are doing wholesale firings that are mindless and dangerous. But then, of course, you get to the other side. People are going to die because of this, because operations are going to be put off. People are not going to get the mental health care they require. People's families are not going to get the health care that they require. We are going to abandon America's veterans, we're going to break our promise to them. And this is going to be a central piece of what's going on here. And I think it's really important that the message go out. The United States government has made a promise to different groups in the United States. Give us your Social Security money. We'll make sure that you have enough money in your retirement. Pay your taxes. We'll make sure that if you're poor, when you're old, that you get medical care, that there is a social safety net. Go and fight for this country, and we'll make sure that we take care of you going forward. And one by one, the President of the United States, Elon Musk, the rest of the MAGA people are breaking these sacred promises to the people of the United States. It's appalling. And it's going to have an effect, not just in Washington, not just on the news. It's going to have an effect in your community. And that's where the resistance is going to have to start, because these people, the 80,000 people who get fired from this agency, the people who are going to get fired from the Department of Education, the tens of thousands they say they're going to fire from Social Security, the tens of thousands they say they're going to fire from the IRS, these people are your neighbors. They're going to feel it. You're going to feel it. Your community is going to feel it. The country's economy is going to feel it. There's only one group in the United States who's not going to feel it. That's the billionaire bros around the president. That's why during the president's speech, to the joint session of Congress on Tuesday night, he said this telling line that I just don't understand why it wasn't picked up by more people, where he said, well, all these things we're doing, they may cause a little disruption, but we are okay with that. A little disruption. You know what that means? Higher prices, fewer jobs, unemployment, recession. And when he says we are okay with that, who does he mean? Does he mean you? Does he mean me? No, he doesn't care about that. What he means is that he and Elon and his billionaire cabinet and their rich friends, they're okay with it because they're not going to feel it. It's a disruption. It's a little disruption when 80,000 people in the Veterans Administration lose their job, when we have negative job growth, as will be announced shortly, when we are seeing the markets go down and people's savings be destroyed, when prices go up. It's a little disruption, but we're okay with that. That is the let them eat cake line of this administration and of this Republican movement. And people ought to be out there saying, a little disruption, my life is a little disruption, my kid's life is a little disruption, the future of my community is a little disruption, the breaking of a promise to veterans is a little disruption, and you're okay with that? Whoever is okay with that, we shouldn't be okay with as voters in the United States. And that's what this is coming down to. Ideology aside, politics aside, these are lives at stake. These are lives being lost. I haven't even gotten into the people, who've got measles, who are going to die of the insane policies from HHS, or the kids who aren't going to be educated or aren't even going to be able to get to school when they shut down the Department of Education. But that's what this is about. It's not about politics. It's about you, me, our families, our neighbors, what's going to happen to us.
President Donald Trump's 25% tariffs on vehicles from Canada and Mexico have caused significant concern in the auto industry, especially for full-size pickups, which are a major part of U.S. sales. While the White House offered a temporary exemption for vehicles that comply with the USMCA rules, automakers remain worried about rising costs, with tariffs potentially adding thousands of dollars to vehicle prices and disrupting supply chains. As manufacturers consider shifting production to avoid tariffs, they fear the long-term impacts on costs and the ripple effect could reach billions, especially for components that cross borders multiple times.
Yeah, Trump is blinking here because, what has happened is he said, I'm going to embrace these great policies. Idiots around me like Peter Navarro, they're supporting these great policies. We're going to have tariffs. Tariffs are great. They work really good for William McKinley. Well, of course, William McKinley was president of the United States around the turn of the last century. He didn't make it through its presidency, by the way. He was assassinated, and his vice president, Theodore Roosevelt, replaced him. And the tariffs that worked at that time had negative consequences, first of all. But secondly, given the nature of the economy at the time, had much smaller consequences for people in general. We discovered when we, emulated that again in the 1930s with the Smoot-Hawley tariffs, or the 1920s with the Smoot-Hawley tariffs, that the U.S. economy took a massive downturn, and it was a contributor to the Great Depression. We don't do this anymore because it's bad economic policy, and that any credible economist would oppose this stuff. That's not why Trump, however, has blinked. Trump has blinked because there are a couple of indicators that suggest that his core base of support is not comfortable with this. One of them, of course, is the stock market downturn, which is directly related to the announcement of the tariffs. The other is that, the big three automakers came to him and said, hey, buddy, this is not really a great idea. We make our cars on both sides of the border. A lot of the trade that goes across the border is intra-company trade. What you're doing will force us to increase prices, lay people off. It will result in plummeting auto sales. Is that what you want? And so he is, pulling back a little bit. As he, his Commerce Secretary yesterday also said, well, we will be able to, reach some accommodations with the Canadians and the Mexicans and meet them halfway and leave some tariffs in place and not others. Why? Because this is a terrible idea. Because it doesn't work, because it hurts people, because it pushes up inflation, because it will lead to job losses, because it will make American companies less competitive. And I think you've seen that the other countries in the world recognize that their only response is to retaliate, and Trump's promise of reciprocity, a word he uses like an 8-year-old who just learned a new word. Is foolish, because then that escalates and escalates and escalates, and you end up with kind of economic mutually assured destruction. Yesterday, I saw a tweet from the Chinese government which said, if the United States wants to get into a trade war or any other kind of war, we're ready. It was real strong. And I think it's something people really need to take to heart. The U.S. is going to be a hostile player. These, tariffs are not abstract things. They have a cost. We are going to, the people that we attack, the countries that we attack, are going to strike back at us. By the way, do the countries pay the price? No. People pay the price. You pay the price. You as a consumer will pay the price. You won't be able to afford a new car if you have a job, if you do not depend on your wayward Social Security check to, if you will actually get your wayward Social Security check and want to use it to pay for the new car. It's not going to be possible. So I would expect, and I'm going to stick my neck out here, that Trump's tariffs go a little bit of the way of Trump's Muslim ban the last time around. And that is to say, they'll talk a lot, they'll do some damage, and then they'll roll it back because they can't actually do it. By the way, that's exactly what's happening on the immigration front, too. They said they're going to round up 11 million people. They can't. We said it here week after week after week. There are not enough people to do it. It would cause huge disruptions. It's not going to happen. And he is firing people now because he is pissed off. Because they said, hey, you can round up all these immigrants, but you can't. And so he's doing a lot of damage, but he's also learning that some of the things that he promised just can't be done.
The CDC has reinstated about 180 employees who were laid off 2 weeks ago, sending them emails to return to work under their previous schedules. The reversal comes after initial termination notices were issued as part of broader federal job cuts under the Trump administration, though it remains unclear if these employees will be spared from future reductions. The CDC, which employs about 13,000 people, had initially planned to cut nearly 1,300 probationary workers, but later reduced the number to 700 to 750, with 180 now reinstated.
Yeah, I mean, this reveals the dangers of what is being done in the same way that letting go of the people who made sure our nuclear weapons revealed the dangers. There is no plan behind this. Elon Musk doesn't know how the government works. The 20-year-olds who work for Elon Musk does not know how the government works. They have no idea where there is waste or fraud or abuse. They do not know the difference between fat and muscle in the United States government. They do not know what is essential or not essential. They're using techniques that may be used in some company where there is, sort of no, life-threatening consequence of being a little overzealous in cutting. But in the United States government, there are issues where lives are at stake. They're at stake when you force air traffic controllers off the job. They're at stake when you force the people who take care of our nuclear arsenals off the job. They're at stake when you force people who are responsible for public health off the job. We will discover that they are at stake when you shut down the Weather Bureau and the people who ensure that we have the ability to anticipate and respond to extreme events. We will discover that some of the other things they're doing have these same effects. For example, they're getting rid of tons of government leases. By the way, none of this is producing major savings in the United States government. None of it. This is a predicate to say we're cutting things, so please now allow us to cut Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid. It is a predicate to then allow them to do the tax cuts that they want to do. It has nothing to do with efficiency. It has nothing to do with making the government better. It has nothing to do with meeting the needs of the American people. But anyway, they're getting rid of these leases, and I noticed that among the leases they're getting rid of are for the places that we store nuclear waste. It's crazy. It's crazy what they're doing. And they think, well, look, if we make a big mistake, we can fix it. Elon said, well, we shut down the Ebola early detection teams. That was a mistake, so we're going to have them back. Well, first of all, they shouldn't have done it. Secondly, he was lying. Because thirdly, they haven't actually reinstalled those people. But, and this is also important, fourth, when you do that, sometimes you produce consequences you can't undo. People die. Things are put at risk. If you don't believe me, go and ask your friends who are a little bit wobbly and flying whether they want to fly right now. I've never seen anything like I'm seeing right now in terms of people who are regular travelers who are saying, I just don't feel comfortable with the U.S. air traffic control system. That should not be the case in a 21st century developed nation. And yet that's exactly where we are right now. Is that it?
No, we have one more. Democrats are facing internal division on how to effectively oppose President Trump, highlighted by disruptions during his recent speech to Congress. While progressive members like Representative Al Green engaged in loud protests and heckling, centrist Democrats criticized these tactics, arguing they were counterproductive and damaged the party's message. Some progressives have voiced frustration with a lack of direction from party leadership, while others suggest more traditional, subdued approaches to resistance would be more effective in appealing to swing voters.
Oh, come on. I'll try to remain calm here. You think sitting there and holding up little signs or having a committee meeting and deciding you're going to wear pink dresses to Donald Trump's joint session of Congress address are helpful? Or do you think they make you look weak? Because right now, that's what happens. People, look at Democrats in Washington. They think they don't have any answers for this. And so, I wrote a long thread on Blue Sky about this. If you want to see it, I'll go and I'll put it up on Substack too. When Donald Trump ran, he didn't care about left or right. In fact, he's got a bunch of people who are former Democrats in his cast. He didn't care about that. What he cared about was strength versus weakness. Okay. Democrats think we're still having the old discussion, but Democrats are portraying weakness. They need to find strong leaders. This is not, by the way, the chance for the centrists to say, yeah, get rid of the progressives. 70% of Americans believe in what is a progressive agenda. That means fair taxes. It means protecting the environment. It means, education reform. It means responsible gun control policy. Look these things up. It's not just me saying 65, 70, 80, 90% of Americans agree on these things. That is what we would have called a progressive agenda. That is not something that we should ignore. That means that the Democratic agenda is actually supported by these people. The key is, how do you get people out to vote? And the way you get them out to vote is you get candidates who speak to people at their local level and explain the threat of the other side and explain that there is a positive agenda for the Democrats, but that also have the ability to say, look, the house is on fire. We've got to do whatever it takes to stop these people. They're trying to destroy our democracy, destroy our country, destroy our allies, strengthen our enemies. This is a critical situation. This is not the time to target one another. There are great progressive voices and strong centrist voices that need to be out there, and some will win in some places and some will win in other places. But it is time to say that if you are not strong, if you are not going to take approaches that have a sense of urgency to them, you got to step aside. And if you're not willing to step aside, we will find a way to push you to the side. Republicans have no problem primarying people who do not support their agenda. Democrats have got to do the same thing. Primary the weak. This is time to get to a new kind of leadership for a new kind of an era. And we've got to act quickly, because if we don't, and we lose in the midterms, or we don't even get to have midterms, we're going to have MAGA around for decades and decades, because they're going to make their reelection assured and our democracy dysfunctional. That's what's important. Pink dresses do not save democracy. Tiny little signs do not save democracy. I got to say, Representative Al Green of Texas, who stood up at age 78 and said, "You do not have a mandate," and was escorted from the chamber, was the only one who did anything that stopped Trump, that stopped the sort of avalanche of lies, that made people take notice. He stood up and he told the truth. And there is in that a very simple lesson. We've all got to stand up in our communities, wherever we have a platform, and we've all got to tell the truth, because the truth is actually the biggest tool that we've got against the lies and against the terrible performance and the terrible consequences of what they're promoting. Anyway, that's my sermonette for today. And we'll have more for you tomorrow. And by the way, earlier I was talking about Smoot-Hawley, and I talked about the Smoot-Hawley tariffs of the 30s, and then I sort of vacillated and I said the 20s, and then I looked it up in a break, and it was 1930, and that's the reason the Smoot-Hawley tariffs were exactly in 1930. They went into effect in the 30s, and they contributed to the Depression. So sorry if I misled you, but here. We fact-checked ourselves because truth matters. Truth matters in everything we do at the DSR Network. you didn't listen to our weekly show on the international consequences from yesterday, Deep State Radio, please do. If you want to hear what we think about what's going on in political consequences, please turn into the new show of Words Matter, being recorded a little later today with Norm Ornstein and I. We got plenty coming for you. So go join it and listen. And as I said the other day, give Scylla Consciousness and the conversation I had with Karen Howe, special listen if you're interested in AI. Great, great, great conversation. Until tomorrow, thanks, Riley. Thanks, Minna. Bye-bye.